He's watching, Kate, watching us burn in hell.
A shot. A dull impact slammed into Rodriguez's chest. He crashed into Jack, and they both went down on their faces behind the Humvee's wheel. "Mike," Jack gasped, pushing up onto an elbow. Rodriguez lay on his back, his body armor punched through over the heart. "Ugh." Mike drew a ragged breath, eyes blown wide at the sky. "Damn." Jack pressed his hands to Mike's chest. Blood seeped through his fingers in a dark stain. "No way, not Mike. Stay with me, brother," Jack pleaded, shaking with terror. "Kate's coming, you'll make it." Kate was already there. She dropped to her knees, tearing open a med kit. Her hands were bloody someone else's and her own, but she was trying to slap an occlusive dressing over the wound. Mike grabbed Jack's hand and, strangely calm, met his eyes. "Jack, you all right?" "I'm fine, don't talk," Jack shot back, feeling tears burn his eyes. "Glad," Mike whispered, barely smiling. A thin thread of blood ran from his lips. "I'm glad that you, oh." He coughed, his body arching with pain. Kate pressed down on the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "Don't move, Mike, don't you dare die," she begged through tears. Suddenly, shouts rose behind them. The enemy realized one of the Americans was down and rushed the assault. Their fury spiked. Han was holding the other side with what strength he had left, but gunfire crackled from everywhere. The enemy was tightening the noose. Mike gave Jack one last, clouded look. "Protect them, brother." His fingers loosened on Jack's hand. His eyes fixed, staring past Jack up into the sky. His arms slipped lifelessly from his friend's grip. A few hours earlier. Subscribe to the channel, hit like, and leave a comment after you listen. We'll continue. Pre-dawn silence hung over the small forward outpost in the Afghan mountains. Jack Miller stood on the wooden lookout, leaning on a parapet of sandbags. He stared into the darkness pooling along the valley below. Far off, roosters crowed in the village, a peaceful sound that didn't fit the nervous tension that pulsed everywhere on the base. Only 2 weeks remained in the rotation. In his head, Jack was counting the days until home to Pennsylvania, to quiet evenings on the porch and his mother's embrace. But here and now, thousands of miles from home, his world was dust, sweat, and constant danger. He cinched the sling of his M4, listening for the faintest rustle. Beside him on the tower, his partner Mike Rodriguez yawned, rubbed his eyes, and gave a crooked grin. "Sleeping on your feet, Miller?" "Nah, just counting stars," Jack muttered, eyes still on the horizon. The eastern sky was only just paling. Dawn would soon pull Shahir Mountain out of the dark, all rock and ridgeline. Jack had been here nearly 9 months. The little outpost, pressed into a mountainside, was a handful of mud brick buildings wrapped in sandbags and barbed wire. A platoon of American soldiers held this stretch of valley. Scattered villages and steep gullies made the ground dangerous. You couldn't see the enemy, but he could see you. "Think it'll be quiet today?" Rodriguez asked, lowering his binoculars. He tried to sound casual, but Jack heard the edge. Every time it got too quiet, a bad doubt settled in. What if the Taliban were setting up right now? "Never quiet," Jack said, grimly joking. "The second we relax, a little present shows up." They still remembered the recent night barrage. A week earlier, insurgents dropped mortar rounds on the post and wounded 2 soldiers. One was their buddy Tim Jackson. A fragment tore into his leg. That night, Jack helped the medic, Kate Baker, cinch a tourniquet on Jackson's shredded femoral. Warm, sticky blood ran over Jack's hands, his heart thudding in his throat. He still couldn't forget how Kate's fingers trembled as she fought the bleed, or how she rested her forehead on his shoulder when the helicopter finally lifted the casualty out. Thinking of Kate, Jack glanced down the slope. A yellowish light flickered by the barracks. Sergeant Collins was probably making coffee on his little gas burner again. Or maybe Kate was up. She often stayed late in the aid station, sorting supplies or jotting the day's events in her notebook. Jack caught himself searching for her silhouette when he came back from patrols. Her presence felt like home, something normal in the chaos. Rodriguez nudged him with an elbow. "Look, our night owl's coming." He nodded toward the ladder. Lieutenant Harper climbed up, yawning and tugging his helmet over mussed hair. The young officer had arrived only a month earlier, replacing the last platoon leader. He tried to project confidence, but a boyish uncertainty still flickered in his eyes. "All quiet?" he asked softly when he reached them. Jack and Mike straightened, pretending to be fresh. "Yes, sir," Jack said. "No movement." Harper nodded, peering into the distance. After a moment, he murmured, "Today we may head to the village to the east. Intel says the elder wants to talk about assistance." "Meeting the locals?" Rodriguez asked, trading a look with Jack. "Yeah, the usual," the lieutenant sighed. "Higher thinks we can get them on our side. We'll see." Jack tensed. Meetings with village elders didn't always go smoothly. Sometimes it was a trap or a waste of time. Orders were orders. "Form up at 6 o'clock, Harper added. "Sergeant Collins is drafting the plan. Hit the brief after your shift." The lieutenant headed down, leaving the two soldiers with fresh worries. Rodriguez muttered under his breath, "Damn, these show and tell walks through villages are eating my liver." Jack nodded silently. He wasn't thrilled either. Daily patrols along watchful paths were routine. Walking into a village to negotiate with a barely known interpreter, that set his teeth on edge. A second rooster crowed down on the base louder. The sky lightened, the mountains' lines coming clear. Jack swept the distance again, all still. The calm felt wrong. "Call it," he told Mike. "Our watch is up." "Yeah," Rodriguez stretched, working the stiffness from his back. "Let's grab coffee while we've got a minute." They climbed down. Jack took one last look at the rose-pale sky over the peaks. A knot of unease tightened in his gut. Another day of war ahead, and who knew what it would bring. On the parade square, the platoon formed up. The sun had cleared the mountains and began to bite, glinting on metal buckles and plates. Sergeant Collins walked the line, checking weapons, armor, helmets, everything where it belonged. Lieutenant Harper stood up front, shuffling intel pages. Next to him shifted their interpreter, a young Afghan named Omar. Jack, in ranks beside Mike Rodriguez, studied the interpreter. The guy seemed calm, a little distant. He wore a plain Afghan army uniform without insignia and a green bandana at his throat. Jack knew little about him. He'd been sent from the district center to help with this meeting. Omar smiled faintly at his own thoughts and avoided the soldier's eyes. Sergeant Collins planted his fists on his hips in front of the formation. "Listen up. Today we're moving to the village of Darvan, about 5 kilometers east. Mission meet with the village elder, discuss their needs, and build cooperation," he called crisply. "Lieutenant Harper will conduct the talk. We're there for security and presence. Stay sharp, though we expect a friendly reception." Jack shared a quick look with Rodriguez. Friendly reception always drew skepticism. Faces in the ranks stayed flat. "We're rolling with 2 armored Humvees," Collins went on. "First truck under the lieutenant him, me, the interpreter, and you, Miller, on the gun." He nodded at Jack. "Second truck Corporal Briggs driving, Rodriguez on the gun. With them are Medic Baker and 2 soldiers from 2nd Platoon who've attached to us." Jack felt a breath of relief that Kate would be in the second truck. If something hit, she'd be a little behind, maybe better positioned. He met her eyes. Kate stood at the end of the formation, tugging her medic pack. She caught his look and gave the barest edge of a smile, as if to say, "You've got this." "In contingencies, no freelancing," the sergeant snapped. "Hold formation, execute orders. Clear." "Yes, Sergeant," the line answered as one. A few minutes later, the convoy rolled out the gate. Jack rode in the gunner's seat, head and shoulders out the top turret of the lead Humvee. A narrow dirt road snaked ahead between rock and stunted green. At the wheel of the first truck was Private Dennis, a quiet kid from Iowa, new to this bad patch. The truck bucked over ruts, dust-stinging eyes and lungs. Jack slowly swept the mounted M240 across the slopes, studying every stone and bush. The valley felt too quiet. Only the engines and armor creaks broke the hush. The radio in his headset crackled softly. Now and then Harper checked on the rear truck. Corporal Briggs replied that all was good. About half an hour passed, and the convoy rolled by a tiny all. A woman in a burqa peered from behind a mud wall, clutching a child. A few kids edged closer, waving for candy or water. Collins ordered over the net not to stop. Out here, anyone could be an enemy spotter. The road bent around a hill. Approaching Darvan, Jack noticed something off. The fields lay empty. At this hour, villagers usually worked the plots, herded goats. Now no one. Only a stray dog darted across the track and vanished among the houses. "I don't like this," he muttered, eyeing the deserted yards. Rodriguez came up on the net from the second truck. "Lead, isn't it weird there's nobody out?" After a short beat, Collins answered, "Maybe they're scared to come out. Stay alert." The convoy halted at the village edge beneath a sagging arch that marked the entrance. A cluster of mud houses hugged a narrow lane. Empty windows stared from all sides. Jack felt sweat bead on his brow, not just from the heat. Lieutenant Harper leaned out the Humvee window and waved. "Dismount. First group with me, we move to the square by the mosque, where the elder will meet us. Second group, secure the rear and the trucks. Briggs, stay at the wheel. Rodriguez, 360-degree scan from the turret." Jack dropped to the ground, rifle at the ready. His heart hammered. He moved up on Harper's left. Sergeant Collins and Omar, the interpreter, flanked them. Two more soldiers closed around the officer. Kate hopped out of the second truck and gave Jack a nod. "Be careful." "You too," he said, watching her stay near the armor, slipping her aid bag from her shoulder just in case. Kate and another soldier held at the vehicles. With a gesture, Harper sent Jack and two others forward along the lane. They worked between houses toward a small open square. An old tree stood in the center. A little mosque with whitewashed walls sat beside it. A few men waited there. In front, a tall, gaunt elder with a white beard in a traditional shalwar kameez. Two younger men stood near him, helpers or guards, arms folded, faces neutral. "There they are," Sergeant Collins said under his breath as the group drew near. "Easy, boys." Lieutenant Harper removed his helmet in respect and greeted the elder. "Assalamu alaikum. I'm Lieutenant Harper. We came to talk as friends." Omar rendered the lieutenant's words in Dari. The elder nodded warmly and answered at length, hands spread. "He says he's glad we've come and hopes for fruitful cooperation," Omar translated evenly. Jack's gaze roamed the square. Too quiet, only a breath of wind stirring the tree. The men in front wore smiles, but the elder's eyes skittered. On a roofline, something flicked a silhouette, maybe a trick of light. Jack narrowed his eyes, trying to make it out. His pulse climbed. "Sir," he murmured to Harper, leaning closer. "Maybe we should move the meeting to base. It's too quiet out here." Harper shot him a chiding look. "Relax, soldier. I've got it under control." The elder kept talking, gesturing toward the mountains. Omar translated about water problems and protection from the Taliban. Jack tried to listen, but his attention frayed. Way too calm. No women, no kids, just these three. Where were the villagers? His gut was shouting now. He scanned window slits, hunting a flash of glass or a muzzle. His fingers settled on the trigger. A sharp clatter sounded at the far end of the street, behind them like a door slammed or a bucket dropped. Jack flinched and snapped around. Collins tensed too. What was that? In the same instant, a loud crack, a shot. Jack jolted. Lieutenant Harper, standing center, rocked. His eyes flew wide in shock. A red flower bloomed on his chest. He toppled onto his back. "Ambush," Sergeant Collins barked, grabbing for the radio. But Jack didn't hear the next shot. He only felt hot wetness spatter his face. The sergeant groaned and clutched his neck. Blood poured through his fingers. Collins sagged to his knees, choking as he tried to clamp the artery. Jack whipped his head around. The interpreter, Omar, was gone, vanished like smoke. The elder and his men slipped away too, darting behind the mosque. It had taken seconds. Bullets hissed overhead, chewing walls and dirt. Ambush. Jack dove behind a low stone lip by the mosque. Another soldier crashed down beside him, elbows plowing dust. Private Lewis, one of the new guys. Pale, shouting something Jack couldn't hear over the roar. Gunfire erupted by the trucks at the village edge. Jack heard Rodriguez rip a burst from the turret gun. Screams, noise. The village woke with dozens of black shapes sliding between houses. Jack risked a look and yanked back. A round sparked off stone inches from his face. Fire came from everywhere, rooftops, corners. He spotted figures in traditional dress with axe. Taliban flashed through his mind. "Lewis, hold your sector," Jack yelled, voice over the din. Lewis jerked a nod and shoved his rifle up over the parapet, firing wild toward the attackers. Jack pulled a breath. The lieutenant and the sergeant were down, or dead. He cut a glance back. Harper lay on his back, glassy eyes to the sky. Collins bled out, slumped against the mosque wall. "Omar sold us out," Lewis rasped, still firing. "I saw him run." Jack clenched his teeth. Rage and fear burned his chest. It had been a setup. Got him it. But there was no time to grieve. He snatched the radio, thumbed the switch. "Base, this is the patrol. We're under attack, need support now," he shouted over the gunfire. Only static answered. Mountain interference, or they were jamming. He switched channels. "Rodriguez, do you copy?" Static, then choppy. "Copy, we're pinned. Taking it from the rear too. Kate," the line died. "Kate," Jack pictured the second team at the trucks under fire. If the ambush was tight, the enemy would cut off their retreat. They were boxed in. "We have to fall back to the trucks," Jack shouted to Lewis. Lewis nodded, then jerked and cried out. A bullet hit his shoulder. He dropped his weapon and toppled to the side, grimacing, clutching the wound. Jack crawled to him and grabbed his collar. "Stay with me, brother," he hissed, dragging him behind the thick trunk of the tree out of the lane of fire. Lewis groaned, gripping his blown-through arm, but still conscious. Rounds sang like molten bees. Jack could feel one might punch into his back any second. No retreat, his people were behind him. He shoved his shoulder to the trunk and keyed the radio again. "Rodriguez, I'm with Lewis by the mosque. Lieutenant and sergeant are down. Lewis is hit. Can you cover us?" Static then. "We're pinned too. Kate with Briggs behind the trucks. Damn, they're flanking." Rodriguez's words cut off in an explosion, grenade, or RPG. Jack's gut dropped. Were they still alive? Just then, a fighter burst from the mosque corner, a young guy in a face wrap with an AK. Jack yanked his pistol and fired point blank into the kid's chest. The attacker rolled in the dust, gasping. Jack surprised himself, pure reflex. While the enemy shifted, Jack made his call. He hauled Lewis up. "Can you move?" "I think," Lewis groaned, rising with help. The round had gone through the shoulder. It bled, but he was lucid. "Back to the trucks, now," Jack ordered. He threw Lewis an arm, and they started edging away from the mosque along the narrow lane they'd come down. Shouts behind them spotted. Jack fired short bursts back, mostly to slow pursuit. There, the familiar bend and a shape in uniform between houses. "Rodriguez," Mike dashed from a nearby yard, waving. "Over here, move." Another soldier ran with him. As Jack and Lewis reached them, he recognized Hannah riflemen from 2nd Platoon. Both were grimy, faces smudged with ash. "Good to see you breathing," Jack panted, tucking in with them behind a wall. "Harper? Collins?" Rodriguez asked, eyes on the rear. Jack shook his head. "They got hit at the start." Mike swore softly through his teeth. That meant no leadership. "Kate?" Jack's look snapped to him, tight with fear. "Behind the trucks." "Briggs is gone," Mike said, flat. "He covered her when a grenade came in. Mike bit his lip. Ice filled Jack's chest. But Kate was alive, that was what mattered. She'd be behind the armor, probably working on someone. They had to reach her, or they'd be picked apart. "Here's the plan," Jack said fast, catching his breath. "We fall back together to the second truck, set a perimeter, and hold until support arrives." "If it arrives," Han muttered, wrapping his oozing, shrapnel-scraped forearm. "It will," Jack snapped, harsher than he meant. He had to believe it. Rodriguez glanced around the corner. "Time to move, or they'll fold on us from every side." Jack nodded to Lewis and passed him to hand for support. "Get him to the trucks. Rodriguez and I will cover." Lewis staggered, but kept his feet, jaw clenched against the pain. Han took his other side. On Jack's count, they sprinted across the open toward the arch, where the Humvees stood. Jack and Rodriguez exploded after them, turned back, and poured fire on the pursuers. Bullets stitched the air overhead. Taliban dove for cover, but Jack was pretty sure he dropped a couple. He saw bodies crumple, blood spreading. He didn't care only that his people lived. They reached the truck. The rear tires were shredded. The windshield was peppered with holes. Behind the armor crouched Kate. She was bandaging the head of someone lying still. Nearby lay Corporal Briggs's body, nearly torn apart by the blast. Jack ripped his eyes away from the ruin. "Kate," he called. She looked up, tears of relief sparking in those blue eyes when she saw him on his feet. "Jack," was all she breathed. No time for it. Jack and Rodriguez took positions on either side of the vehicle, bracing for the next push. Shadows were already pooling ahead between houses, attackers closing the square. "We hold," Jack shouted to the rest. He had 3 magazines left for the M4. Rodriguez had another belt for the turret gun on the second truck. The enemy surged like a wave. Jack checked the radio, maybe he'd get through now. Desperate, he called. "Base, this is Patrol Darvan. We need air or artillery now. We're surrounded, heavy casualties." This time the radio woke with static, then an operator's voice broke through the noise. "Copy, hold on. Air will be on station in about 15 minutes. Hang in. Copy." 15 minutes. They traded a look, an eternity. Despair and fury tangled in Jack's chest. He flicked off the safety, dropped to a knee, and aimed where the enemy flickered out of the building's gloom. Hold. At any cost, he told himself, and squeezed, sending the first burst to meet them. The first assault rolled back, but the Taliban were gearing up again. Jack reloaded his M4, his fingers trembling with strain and anger. Beside the Humvee's hull, Mike Rodriguez checked the feed on his machine gun, muttering a prayer or a curse under his breath. Han and the wounded Lewis, freshly patched by Kate, lay behind a low rock berm. Han held his carbine one-handed, the other was sliced up by shrapnel, and Lewis, pale from blood loss, still gripped a pistol and fought to stay conscious. "They're coming," Kate shouted, peeking past the truck's bumper. Jack heard an engine snarl. An old pickup shot out from behind the far houses, barreling straight down the lane at them. A mounted gun jutted from the bed with a shadowed gunner behind it. "No launcher," Rodriguez swore. They hadn't brought heavy weapons to a sit-down. The pickup's gun lit off long bursts, sang overhead, kicking dust off walls and sparking against the Humvee's armor. One rear wheel blew, and the truck sagged. "Fire!" Jack ordered. He and Rodriguez opened up together. Jack worked the cab. At roughly 100 meters, he saw the windshield spider web with cracks. Rodriguez walked rounds across the bed, trying to catch the gunner. Han snapped a few shots from cover, mostly wasted. The pickup kept coming, the gunner still hosing the street. "Grenade," Lewis rasped, dragging his wounded arm to his belt. A hand grenade, an M67, sat in his palm. Catching on, Jack plucked it from Lewis's fingers and yanked the pin with his teeth. When the pickup bucked over another rut at about 20 meters, Jack rose to a crouch and heaved the grenade hard under the front wheels. A flash, a deafening slam. The truck popped into the air like a toy, slammed back down on its side, smoking. The gunner and driver vanished in the fireball. The charred bed skidded to the shoulder and stopped, burning, just a few strides from Han's position. "Got it," Rodriguez blew out, wiping his brow. The relief was premature. A whistle cut in from the left over a courtyard wall. The enemy fired an RPG. Jack only had time to cover his head before the round burst a few yards behind him. The shock wave flattened him and rang his bell. "Jack," Kate's voice cut through. He lifted his head. A smoking crater yawned off to the side, shards had peppered wall and dirt. Han lay flat, tucked behind the wrecked pickup, now serving as a barricade. Lewis groaned his injured arm had been hit again, blood seeping through the wraps. Jack shook off the ringing. Fresh bursts ripped from the houses. The Taliban pressed, trying to ride the chaos after the blast. Shapes flickered between buildings, working to flank from the left. Jack grabbed his rifle and pushed up, limping his legs numb from the hit. A fighter popped out from a corner in a black tunic with his rifle up, barely 10 meters away. The AK-47's muzzle climbed, centering on Jack. Pop, pop, 2 shots cracked from behind. The attacker jerked and pitched face first, weapon clattering. Kate stood beyond him, shaking, pistol in a 2-handed grip. I killed him, she whispered, staring at the still body. You were right on time, Jack rasped. There was no space to soothe the shock new fire snapped close. He rushed to her, tucked his body between her and the lane, and gently lowered her pistol. You're okay. You did what you had to. Her eyes shone with shock, but she nodded and slid back in behind the truck, catching her breath. Rodriguez kept raking bursts at the advancing fighters. He yelled. About 2 dozen, they're closing in. Jack looked over the flaming pickup's hood. The enemy was spreading out, snatching up angles. There was nowhere else to fall back. How much ammo? He called to Rodriguez. Half a belt, Rodriguez answered, then cut down 2 fighters trying to crawl in from the right. I've got 2 mags, Han shouted, lifting his rifle with his good hand. Jack checked his pouch, 1 full magazine left, and a few loose rounds in the one seated. Kate had only a pistol with a handful of rounds. 15 minutes, he remembered the promised heir. Who knew how long it had been, 5 minutes or all 15? In fights like this, time bent. No falling back, hold the line, he shouted, meeting Rodriguez's eyes. Mike gave a short nod. A hard fire burned their fight to the end. Another push, the Taliban rushed in close, several figures bursting out with shouts of Allahu Akbar and La ilaha illallah from different angles, spraying wild fire. Jack, Rodriguez, and Han answered as one. Through his sights, Jack watched one go down, then a second, a third, and more surged in behind them. A hot streak tore across Jack's shoulder, a round grazed his left arm. He hissed but kept shooting. Another blast punched nearby. The enemy lobbed a hand grenade to peel them off the vehicle. Shrapnel rattled the armor. Kate cried out and hugged the ground. Jack's ears went blank for a heartbeat. When he leaned out past the wheel again, some attackers were nearly on top of them 5 meters out, bouncing from wall to wall. Any second, they'd cinch the ring. Bastards, Rodriguez barked, half exposing himself to hose a long burst, scything dust and blood along the attacker's path. Several figures crumpled under his fire. Jack rose to cover the other side and caught a shape on the nearest roof. A fighter had climbed onto the flank and was aiming straight at Mike's back. A heartbeat, and he'd pressed the trigger. Jack couldn't even shout. Suddenly Mike, as if feeling the crosshairs, snapped a glance over his shoulder and spotted the roofman. Without thinking, he lunged sideways straight into Jack. A shot. A dull impact hammered Rodriguez's chest. He crashed into Jack, and they both went down on their faces behind the Humvee's wheel. Mike, Jack gasped, pushing up on an elbow. Rodriguez lay on his back, his armor punched through over the heart. Ugh, Mike drew a ragged breath, eyes blown wide at the sky. Damn. Jack clamped his hands on Mike's chest. Blood seeped through his fingers in a dark stain. No, not Mike. Stay with me, brother, Jack begged, shaking with horror. Kate's coming, you'll make it. Kate was already there, dropping to her knees and ripping a med pack open. Her hands were bloody, someone else's and her own, but she worked to slap an occlusive patch over the wound. Mike gripped Jack's hand, strangely calm, and met his eyes. Jack, you okay? I'm fine, don't talk, Jack blurted, tears burning. Glad, Mike whispered, a faint smile touching his lips. A thin thread of blood slipped from his mouth. I'm glad that you, oh. He coughed, body bowing with pain. Kate pressed harder, trying to stop the bleed. "Don't move, Mike, don't you dare die," she pleaded through tears. Shouts rose behind them. The enemy realized an American was down and charged. Their fury spiked. Han held the other side with what strength he had left, but fire cracked from every direction. The ring was closing. Mike gave Jack one last, dim look. "Take care of them, brother." His fingers slackened in Jack's grip. His eyes fixed, staring past Jack into the sky. His arms slipped from his friend's hands. "Mike, Mike, no," Jack groaned as the truth hit. His friend wasn't breathing. The world narrowed to that still body. A white-hot spear of pain punched Jack's heart, mingling with an icy, lethal calm. Kate choked and covered her mouth when she saw Rodriguez was gone. But there was no time to break. The enemy was already there. They broke through, Han shouted from the right. Jack gently lowered Mike's head to the dirt. His friend's lids were half open, the gaze empty. Jack stroked a hand over his eyes and closed them. "Goodbye, brother," he whispered, lips shaking. A burst hissed overhead, forcing him down. Kate seized Jack's shoulders. "Jack, Jack, we have to hold." The desperation in her voice snapped him back. He jerked upright, wiped his wet eyes with the back of his hand, and scanned. Rounds cracked close. The enemy poured lead into the skeletons of the trucks. Han fired on fumes. Lewis was out cold. Jack snatched up his rifle. Almost no ammo left. He met Kate's eyes, saw his own grief and doom reflected there, and also her faith in him. They were alive, and while they were alive, they'd fight. "For my brother, you cowards," Jack breathed, a cold stillness settling inside. He leaned out and sent his last long burst into the nearest fighter. The man dropped, and another sprinted into his place. "Black on ammo," Han yelled. Jack glanced back. Behind them sat Briggs's ruined Humvee. On its roof, an M2 heavy gun still mounted. Maybe there was ammo left. Without hesitating, Jack vaulted onto the hood and grabbed the turret rim. "Cover me." Kate raised her pistol. Han lifted his empty rifle for what bluff it offered. The seconds Jack clawed upward felt like forever. Rounds buzzed by, but somehow none found him. There it was charged and ready. Jack rapped the butterfly triggers. Heat licked his flank, a graze along his ribs, but he ignored it and mashed down. The M2 roared, vomiting lead. Jack swept the barrel side to side, chewing through walls, fences, anything that could hide a shooter. The air turned to thunder, brass raining down like a deadly golden shower. His vision blurred, sweat and blood from cuts stung his eyes. He shouted, dumping all the pain and fury into the howling gun. The Taliban scattered, stumbling into his storm. Then the sky over the village thundered louder. Skimming in low from the valley, a gray-green shadow ripped into view, an Apache attack helicopter. Two fighters streaked behind, knifing the air. The Apache was shooting on approach. Guided rockets punched the near hillside where enemy reserves sat. Earth and fire geysered. The helicopter's gun carved the street farther in, slicing off the retreat. Jack kept raking the fleeing fighters until the belt ran dry, and the M2 fell silent, smoking hot. The Taliban broke, scattering some dropping dead, others vanishing into the mountain cuts. The Apache circled, hunting stragglers. A distant boom rolled air hit a cluster of retreating militants. "Clear, they're running," Han yelled, raising a hand. Jack climbed down from the turret and nearly collapsed. Kate was there, helping him off. She wrapped an arm around him, steadying. His head roared. It had all happened so fast and so horribly. He looked around. The village was a sieve and a ruin. Smoke and propellant stank in the air. Their people lay where they fell. Lieutenant Harper off a ways where he dropped at the start. Sergeant Collins stilled against the mosque wall. Lewis stirred, wounded, alive. Han lived too, limping over. By the Humvee's wheel lay Mike Rodriguez's body. Kate sobbed behind her hand. Reality folded over Jack. His friends were gone. Mike, he sank to his knees by his friend and took his limp hand. He wanted to speak, but his throat closed. "We made it," Han said quietly, crouching beside him, eyes bitter as he scanned the wreckage. "Thank you. You saved us, brothers." Jack said nothing. Tears and rage boiled in his chest. He only shook his head. "Mike, he saved us all," he forced out at last. Kate covered her face and wept. Jack pulled her close by the shoulders. They stayed there by their friend until 2 helicopters dropped from the sky evac and cover at last. Jack raised his eyes into the harsh Afghan sun. Pain and exhaustion warped the world. His legs would not hold. The tension bled out, and the edges of his vision softened. "We survived," drifted through his mind. The last thing he saw before blacking out was Kate's face, streaked with tears and dust, those blue eyes full of pain and gentleness as she called his name. Jack blinked awake into bright lamplight. For a second, he thought he was home in his room. The stab in his side and the antiseptic smell pulled him back. He lay in a hospital bed under a sheet. His right arm was bound up. Bandages wrapped his chest tight. "Awake?" a soft voice asked. He turned his head. Kate sat at his side in a clean uniform, strands of sandy hair escaping her cap. Shadows under her eyes, the weight on her face, yet when she saw him conscious, relief warmed her smile. "Hey," he croaked. His throat was dry, and she handed him a canteen. He took a few sips, looking around. A big base aid station, judging by the beds and gear. "Charlie Base," Kate said, reading his mind. "They flew you out after the fight. Doc says you were lucky no fragments went deep, and the round only grazed your ribs." Jack nodded weakly. Memories came in shards. The gun's roar, Mike, his heart clenched. He shut his eyes against the scene of his friend's death. Kate set her palm over his. "I'm so sorry." He heard the break in her voice. She'd cried too. He turned her hand and squeezed. "We did what we could," he whispered. "Mike, he saved me. Saved all of us." "I know," Kate said, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. "He's a true hero. They all are. Harper, Collins, Briggs. We'll carry them with us." She pulled several metal tags on chains from her pocket dog tags. Jack recognized Mike Rodriguez's among them. She set them in his hand. "They pulled these from the bodies. You'll want to get Mike's to his family." Jack's hand shook around the cold metal. He fought not to break again. "How are Louis and Han?" he asked, grabbing a steadier subject. "They'll live," Kate said gently. "Louis had surgery, and they've moved him to Germany for rehab. Han's staying and doesn't want to leave the unit, though his leg's banged up. They pinned a medal on him on you too, by the way." "A medal?" Jack's mouth twisted. "You earned it," she said, squeezing his hand. "You literally saved us. The battalion commander said you took command after the officers fell and beat back the attack. They're putting you in for the Bronze Star." Jack shook his head. "The price was too high. I'd give every ribbon back if the guys could be here." Kate nodded, understanding. Silence sat with them. Behind a screen, a doctor's steps and a wounded man's low moan drifted by. "They never caught Omar," she said after a moment. "The interpreter, he vanished. Must have been working for the Taliban." Anger edged her voice. The betrayal cut her too. Jack set his jaw. "We trusted him. Enough about that." He tried to sit, and Kate helped him up, fluffing a pillow behind his back. He grimaced but swung his legs over the side. "What are you doing?" she asked, worried. "Trying to stand," he said, stubborn. "How long was I out?" 2 days, she said. "Don't rush it, you're still weak." He stood anyway. His knees wobbled and Kate caught his elbow. "We ship tomorrow," she said. "They cut the rotation. After that fight, they're sending us home early." "Home," he breathed. The word felt foreign. He dreamed of it for months, and now it was finally close. He looked at Kate. "What about you? When do you go?" "With you," she said with a faint smile. "They're moving me stateside, too likely to a military hospital slot." He nodded, relieved there wouldn't be an instant parting. He tried a step, then another. Kate stayed close, ready to grab him. "Do you have somewhere to land?" she asked softly. "I mean, someone to meet you." Mom will be at the airport, Jack said. After that, we'll see. He met her eyes. Warmth tightened in his chest. You? I'll go to my sister's in Colorado to rest a bit, she said. She looked down, almost shy, then added, but I'd really like to see you too. Jack held his breath for a beat. He let go of her elbow and, mustering courage, brushed his palm along her cheek. Promise me we'll meet up. I need you, Kate. She gave a small sob and leaned into him, hugging tight. He groaned at the rib pain and hugged her back anyway. They stood like that, finding shelter in each other's warmth, far from war and ruin. After a few seconds, she stepped away, wiped her eyes, and smiled a little. Sorry, I'm still a mess. It's okay, Jack smiled. Pretty sure we both are. The next day, a military transport clawed for altitude out of Bagram. On board were Jack, Kate, and the rest of their platoon. With them, several wooden coffins draped in American flags started their journey home. Jack sat strapped in, watching the Afghan mountains shrink through the little oval window. Kate dozed with her head on his shoulder. He tucked a blanket around her and closed his eyes. Faces rose behind his eyelids. Mike Rodriguez's grin, Sergeant Collins's steel stare, Lieutenant Harper's calm features. They were going home with him carried in memory and in heart. Jack took Mike's field notebook from his pocket, somehow unscathed in the fight. He thumbed the pages with his friend's rough-scrawled draft letters to a sweetheart, funny sketches from outpost life, song lists he wanted to blast back home. A piece of Mike's soul Jack would keep forever. He pressed the notebook to his chest, shut his eyes, and let the tears come. Not the scalding tears of despair quiet, bitter tears of farewell and gratitude. Jack Miller had survived. A new life waited ahead. But he would never forget the price paid for that chance, or those who walked through fire with him, became his family, and gave their lives for his. The plane pointed west toward home. Jack filled his lungs. Beyond the clouds spread a peaceful sky, and in it he saw a glint of hope. He whispered so no one could hear, "Thank you." Not sure whether he spoke to God, to the fallen, or to fate itself, Jack felt a heavy weight lift a little. The road ahead would be hard, but he was not alone, no. He had reasons to keep living. After a couple of hours, he drifted off too, the engine's steady hum lulling him. Mike's journal clutched like a treasure. Afghanistan fell behind. Tomorrow waited for him and Kate. 4 weeks later, Jack Miller stood on the green lawn of a small cemetery outside Houston, Texas. The sun was bright. Birds chattered in the oak branches, a quiet, warm day, a world away from the Afghan mountains. A fresh headstone rose before him, carved with a name, Mike Rodriguez, dates of birth and death. A small American flag fluttered beside it, and white lilies lay where a mother's careful hands had set them. Mrs. Rodriguez stood with a hand on her husband's arm. Emptied by grief, they still held themselves with dignity. When Jack had come to their home the day before, they knew him at once. Mike had shown them platoon photos. His mother hugged Jack a long time, thanking him through tears for coming. His father gripped Jack's hand without words. Today, at the funeral, Jack wore his dress uniform with everything he had been handed so far. Among the ribbons, the Purple Heart for his wound and the Bronze Star for that cursed fight. The medal meant little to him. After the honors and the folding of flags, when people began to drift away, he stepped to the grave to keep a promise. "Ma'am, sir," he said quietly to Mike's parents, "I have something for you." He drew out a small, weathered notebook in a scarred leather cover, the one Mike kept in his chest pocket. Mike's mother took it with trembling hands and ran her fingers over the nicks. It was his journal thoughts, letters home he never sent. He wanted you to know, Jack's voice failed. Right up to, before it happened, he was thinking about home, about you, about being a kid. He loved you so much, and he meant to come back. Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes filled. She pressed the notebook to her heart. "Thank you, son." Mr. Rodriguez nodded, speechless, and pulled his wife close. Jack stepped to the stone and went to one knee. His hand shook as he set a bright tag on the grass, Mike's dog tag with his name and number. Jack had kept it since the fight, taking it from his friend's neck. Now it belonged here. "Goodbye, brother," Jack whispered, bowing his head. A soft wind lifted his collar like an unseen hand on his shoulder. He sank into the hush for a few minutes, saying a prayer or just offering good memories. He heard Mike's laugh, their late-night tower talks, the morning they joked about a quiet day. A tear slid down Jack's cheek and fell into the lawn. It was a gentler tear. Mike wouldn't have wanted him drowned in grief. Jack rose, came to attention, and rendered a final salute, one soldier's farewell to another. Then he turned to Mike's parents. "If you ever need anything, I'm here. Mike and I were brothers. It would be an honor to help, any way I can." "You've already helped," Mike's father managed at last, voice rough with held-back feeling. "You brought a piece of him back in that book. Thank you, son." Mike's mother hugged Jack again. "Take care of yourself. Mike was proud of you. So are we." Jack could only nod. As he stepped away, he saw a slim figure in a light blue dress. Kate. She had come too. She hadn't served long with Mike, but she knew him and couldn't stay away. She waited for Jack to reach her. Concern shadowed her face. He stopped, sighed, and met those sky-blue eyes that had seen so much with him. "How are you?" she asked softly, touching his hand. "Calmer now," he said honestly. He felt as if he had finished a mission, the most important of his life. "You?" Kate gave a sad smile. "I'm thinking about the fact that we're alive, and that we have to live for them." Jack squeezed her fingers in thanks. She always found the simple words that mattered. They walked slowly toward the gate. Behind them, the Rodriguez family and a new grave settled under flowers. Jack looked back one last time. The sun slipped behind a cloud, laying a brief shadow across the marble cross. Then light broke through again, gilding the name. "I won't fail you, brother," Jack told the air. Beyond the iron gate, a quiet street lay in noon sun. Life moved. Cars passed. People hurried on. Somewhere children laughed, the ordinary peace men like Mike had given everything to protect. Kate stopped and laced her fingers with his. "Time to go," she said gently. "We've got a long road ahead." Jack nodded. They slid into the waiting car for the airport. On the drive, Kate leaned into him, and he put an arm around her shoulders. Familiar American scenes slid past the window. His heart still hurt, but it wasn't empty now. It held his brother's memories and a small, steady flame of hope for the future, a future he would earn, day by day, to be worthy of their sacrifice. A new day waited. The wounds of war healed slowly, but Jack Miller knew he would not let the dark have him. He had people to live for, and he carried forever those for whom he would live with honor. He drew Kate closer and looked into the pale blue of the horizon. Despite the ache, he felt a quiet beginning deep inside. It was heavy, but not hopeless. Life continued, and where there is life, there is hope. Hit like, and don't forget to subscribe. The next story will be even more intense. But if you are under 18, don't even think about clicking next.